teachers have read it. What was your how are my students this dumb moment? Me, I'm thinking of a fruit that is yellow and very sour. Student chicken parks. Not a teacher, but was helping my friend who's a tar go over some first year essays. It was an essay about video games. And aside from the format being non-existent, one of the first sentences was something along the lines of there are many examples of video games, such as the Wii and PS4 and Zelda. Unfortunately, she wasn't allowed to grade any papers below 50%. He got a 50%. One of my 16-year-old students asked, while starting a multiple choice test, if it mattered what letter he chose. I just stared at him. Sometimes there are no words. Are mermaids real? Followed shortly by I don't believe in dinosaurs. She was 16. I asked my class of 5th graders what city they live in, and the first response was Texas. I asked my students to write a sentence and give an example. One of the students aged 12, 13 asked what's an example? Actually really hard to explain. Give me an example of an example. Don't know if this counts, but I was a tar for a semester in grad school. Never again. One student submitted this paper I will never forget. Basically, the author was wrong because the student found the argument boring. In explaining the author's argument, he got most points wrong and then proceeded to say he had a better argument. His argument was the author's argument. I have a poster on my wall that says something about not believing everything you read on the internet, and it attributes the quote to Abraham Lincoln. Student said, wait, did they have internet back then? I teach swimming lessons and lifeguarding courses. During one, I was trying to teach them CPR, and instead of showing them first, I told them to show me what they already knew about it. I then proceeded to observe 15, 16, 20-year-olds do the weirdest shit to those poor training dolls. My favorite though was the kid who did a 2-foot jump onto the chest of the dummy. The dummy slid out from under his feet like a cartoon banana and he landed on his rear end on the pool deck. Good times. A classmate of mine in elementary school had this exchange with our teacher. What's the answer to this multiple choice question with 3 choices? A. No. C. No. I don't know. I teach intro geology. I gave a lab quiz on the density and buoyancy lab we had done the week before. One of the questions asked how are we able to build ships out of steel, considering that we measured steel to be more dense than water the week before. Almost the entire class gave variance of the ocean is so big compared to a boat that all the water is able to keep the boat afloat. As an answer, I get some version of this answer every semester, but it really struck me because so many of them put it, and they weren't just copying each other. This school happens to be right next to a bay, so I took a large, uninteresting rock from the prep room and marched the students outside to the bay. I said this rock is about 8 kilos and has a density of about 2.4 GCC, but according to your last test responses, the bay is so big that it should float. I threw the rock into the bay and we all patiently waited for it to bob back up to the surface. 3 weeks into writing a research paper. Okay, today we'll continue writing the body paragraphs of the essay. Student, what essay? During a spelling test last year, I said a word 3 times and a student asked, "Miss, how do you spell that?" I wouldn't call him dumb, but I did stop and stare at him thinking it was a joke. When I was student teaching last year, one of my students made a comment about the 52 states. I corrected him and said there are 50 states, and he asked me if I remembered to count both Washingtons, as in Washington and Washington, D.C. College instructor, you would be shocked. Just last year multiple students can't save Word docs as PDFs. Students take smartphone pictures of every single slide while I lecture, even though I upload them to our LMS. Personal favorite when asked to insert a picture into a Word document. One student prints the Word doc, prints the picture, puts the picture on the Word doc, Takes a smartphone picture and uploads the file. Miss my millennial students. Spent 15 minutes with my 9th graders going over MLA headings in great detail. Even gave them a reference sheet to keep at home. Later received at least 3 essays from students named your name. Truly sad times. Not a teacher, but a girl in my college bio class asked, if a woman doesn't have a uterus, how does she go to the bathroom? I teach on the college level and students try to convince me dumb stuff is true a lot. At least once a semester a student will try to fight with me saying Africa is a country. I'm not a teacher, but I work in a school. Every semester at least one class comes into my computer lab to take a test on the computer. The teacher reminds them all that no sites other than the test page are allowed. There's always one kid who pulls up Google the first time he doesn't know an answer. It's like clockwork. During a unit on Vietnam I was discussing the number of bombs dropped by the US and a student asked me if all those bombs are what killed the dinosaurs. Had another student ask if Pearl Harbor was still alive. After doing a mini lesson on it last December, she thought it was a woman's name. I have a lot more, but those are my 2 most recent, egregiously dumb ones. Not a teacher, but one freshman in my class took a rip of his vape and got caught by the substitute teacher. He tried to deny it by saying he could make vapor out of his mouth with nothing else. I'm a student, and in my physics the teacher was explaining how space is a big vacuum, and one student was super confused, and after asking some questions it eventually became clear he was thinking of a vacuum cleaner. This is a classmate of mine. During English, she asked if she had to spell her name. In English, I live in Belgium. During biology, we watched a documentary about the ocean. When a manta appeared, she said, "Look, that bird can dive." She said that she's a vegetarian because she only eats meat she likes. When talking about climate change, she was saying that our class is full of horrible people because we don't do that much for the climate. When we asked her what she does for the climate, she said she doesn't do anything for the climate because other people need to do that. She thinks she's the smartest girl in class. University course paper on witches spelled witch throughout the whole paper. Favorite sentence witches and broomsticks. Footnoted a phone number as a source. Marking those papers broke me. George Clooney was the first president, right? 10th grader. Coach, I was a bowl coach as well for a high school. RBO teacher was talking about menstrual cycles. What is that? 9th grade female. Coach, I walked into the weirdest women's restroom. There were toilets with no stalls. I couldn't figure out how to pee in them. You walked into the men's bathroom. Those were urinals you saw. Oh. How do men pee in them? Same 9th grade female. What is Vladimir Lenin's first name? 8th grader, I replied, Joseph. Does a male octopus have 8 testicles? 9th grade boy. In history class. I'm an English teacher and coach of a boys cross-country team at my school. One of my runners showed up to a meet wearing a suit and tie, as well as slacks, even though I specifically told all the runners to wear their singlets and race shoes not only the day before, but in an email earlier that morning and right before they all got on the buses. I said, last call. If anyone needs to get their singlet and race shoes, go grab them now. Kids sometimes. One of my 6th graders had a brain fart moment. Couldn't remember the word for suspenders. Called them farmer straps, complete with hooking his thumbs through his imaginary suspenders and moving his hands up and down like an old guy wearing suspenders might do. And I laughed so hard I cried and almost fell out of my damn chair. I was talking about CFL light bulbs and the fact that they contain mercury. One high school freshman raised his hand and asked if they had to go to Mercury to get it. I'm not a teacher, but in my IB math studies course, we spent a good hour and a half explaining to a group of girls that you can't divide anything by 0. It was frustrating to watch them try to argue that you can divide 7 calculators into groups of 0. My teacher just couldn't comprehend the people he had to deal with. I teach college in the UK, so 16 18-year-olds. Mainly teach maths resit, so they failed before but no excuse. Group of them having an argument. I go over and ask what's wrong. Majority of them trying to tell one student that you get 10 marks on every exam just for writing your name and ID number on the front. Other one only disagreed because he said last time got less than that on the exam. Marks just for correctly filling out your name. I teach high school. During a lab I told my students to use string for something, and I told them to tie the string in a knot. They legit responded, "We aren't Boy Scouts. We can't tie knots." For Women's History Month, I had my students give presentations on famous women in history. One student got up and, dead serious, gave a presentation on Anne Franklin. Last year I was at TAR for gender studies at a reasonably well-ranked university in the US. I asked students to write a short story about how life for humans would be if we reproduced in a different way and how it would affect society. For example, we grow our babies in jars in the hospital. How would that affect society? I told them not to write anything they wouldn't want their old lady teaching teen to read. I got 4 pages of explicit spider pee right now. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.